Good morning. Welcome to church. I am really happy to be with you this morning. The two young girls that led worship this morning, I thought that was awesome. Can we give them a hand? My name is Garet Arnold. I come from the big city of Maryville. Just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Maryville my whole life. After I graduated high school, I went to Bible college down in Springfield, Missouri. After that, I bounced around a little bit. I went and I internshiped at a church for about a year. Then I moved to Kansas City for 3 years where I did construction. And then for the past year, I've been up in Maryville working at a church called The Bridge. My mom and dad, Rainey and Carol, are here with me this morning, and my fiance Emma is here with me. We met about a year ago. I moved to Maryville from Kansas City, and I met this young girl, and about a month ago today, I got down on one knee and I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. And yeah, miracles happen. Miracles happen. We're getting married November 11th this year. So yeah, we're in the weeds of it. And so if we've got any prayer warriors in here, you can add us to your list. We are planning, I feel like, the fastest wedding ever. And so we would appreciate your prayers. We need it. This morning, we are going to be in Genesis chapter 15. We're going to read verses 1 through 6. I don't have a real long message this morning. I'm going to keep it pretty short. I heard, blessed are the long-winded, but the short-winded will be invited back. Genesis 15, 1 through 6 says, after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Can everybody say vision? Vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eleazar of Damascus? And Abram said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Then the word of the Lord came to him, This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. He took him outside and he said, Look up in the sky and count the stars. If indeed you can count them, then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Let's pray together. Father, I just want to thank you, God, for your word. I want to thank you, Lord, for this community of believers, God, that have gathered here this morning to know you, to worship you, to spend time in your presence. Thank you, God, for this church. Pray, Lord, that you would, that your Holy Spirit would just rest in this place today, God, that we would encounter you, that we would hear from you, and that we would get a fresh word from you and be drawn closer to you. Give us your heart, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Has anybody in here ever had a vision? My mom was a real visionary whenever I was younger. She's kind of got big eyes right now. She doesn't like it whenever I throw her into my messages. But the people who are closest to me, you get thrown in, so you might want to keep your distance. My mom was a real visionary. She used to always have this vision that I would have a clean room. And she would just kind of like harp on that all the time, and I'm like, Mom, stop barking up that tree. It's not going to happen. And unfortunately for her, it never did. As a kid, I was just your typical kid. I never had a clean room. This morning, I want to ask this church, what is this church's vision? You can have a vision for anything. You can have a vision for your home. You can have a vision for your business. You can have a vision for your marriage. You can have a vision for your spouse, who you want your spouse to be. What is this church's vision? Is your vision small and nearsighted? Or is your vision robust? Does your vision extend? Do you have a vision for this church to just exist in this community? Or do you have a vision for this church to thrive and be the epicenter, the lifeblood of the community of Mountain City? Me and Emma, we're planning this wedding. We have a vision for what we want that day to look like. We know what we want that day to look like. We have a vision for our marriage. We know what we want our marriage to look like. Emma recently, she bought her wedding dress. And apparently, I'm not allowed to see it. And so, the other night, this was like a week ago, we're with my parents, we're watching America's Got Talent, and my mom and Emma, they go back in my mom's closet, and Emma tries on the dress for her, and my dad comes home, and so I'm sitting in the living room by myself just watching TV, and my dad's like, where's your mom? And I'm like, oh, she's back in the closet. Emma's showing her dress. And so all of a sudden, now I'm out there by myself. My dad goes back there, and my mom walks out, and she's like, wow! I'm like, what? She's like, that was amazing. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, whatever you're envisioning, I promise you it's going to fall short of what it actually looks like. Then my dad walks out, and he's like wiping tears from his eyes, and he's like, wow. My mom's like, Garrett, you better step it up. You're going to have to clean up, step up your game, or you're going to look bad. I'm not making this up. This is a true story. If you don't have a vision for where you're going, how are you going to know what you're aiming for? How are you going to know how to get there? Our mission is the Great Commission, right? Go into all the world, preach the gospel, baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. But what is our vision? Proverbs 29:18 says, where there's no vision, the people perish. The church, we must be a people of vision. We've got to know where we're going. We've got to know what the goal is, what we're aiming for. If you're taking notes this morning, I encourage you to do that. People who take more notes have bigger mansions in heaven. Point number 1 is when the Lord is in the vision, He will give the provision. When the Lord is in the vision, He will give the provision. Verse 1 said that after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. I recently read a book by this author named Mark Batterson. The book is called Chase the Lion. In this book, he says that if your dream doesn't scare you, it's too small. I think that our visions should give us a little bit of discomfort. There should be a little bit of fear. I'm not saying that we should live from a position of fear, because over and over in the Bible, the Lord says, don't be afraid, do not fear. We're not supposed to be a people of fear, but I do think that whenever we get a God-sized vision, there should be some discomfort in that. Very rarely in the Bible have I ever seen God call the people to do something that did not require some faith, that did not require them to have some courage. So why is Abraham scared? Why is the Lord saying, do not fear? Well, in Genesis chapter 12 is when the Lord initially calls Abraham to leave his hometown, go to another country, and He says, I'm going to make you into a great nation. So 3 chapters later, there's still no fruit of that. So the Lord comes to Abraham, He says, you know what? Your reward is going to be very great. Don't be afraid. I'm in this, and so I'm going to provide. If the Lord is in the vision, He will give the provision. God likes to do the impossible. He's in the business of doing big things. Even if it seems like we don't know how we're going to get there, the Lord will provide. Point number 2 is that your vision should extend past your life. Verse 2 said that, but Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eleazar of Damascus? And Abram said, you have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Then the word of the Lord came to him, this man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. So then God takes Abram outside the tent. He says, come outside with me. I want to give you a visual. I want to give you something to imagine. I want to give you a vision. He says, look up in the sky and count the stars. If indeed you can count them, then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. See, Abraham's vision was for a son. That was his vision. That was as far as his vision extended. He wanted an heir to carry on his name. And the Lord didn't have a problem with that. God, he understands the desires of Abraham's heart, and he says, look, I've heard your petitions. I understand the desire of your heart. I want to give you an heir. I want to give you a son. But I want to extend your thinking. I want you to imagine something a little bit bigger. I want you to look up into the sky. I want you to count the stars. I understand that you want a son. But I have a vision for you that's bigger than that. I have a vision for you that's going to extend for generations, for all of eternity. Sometimes we make the mistake and we think that whenever we envision something, we think of only things that we can immediately see, things that we can imagine, things that we can partake in. But God, he's a generational God, right? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So God wants us to think long term. Me and Emma, we have a desire to plant and start our own church someday. And so we discussed this a lot, and part of me and Emma's vision for our church is that we want to set a vision for our church that there will be things that we get to see come to fruition in our lifetime. But then we also want to set some visions that only our kids are going to get to see. And then we want to set some other visions that only our grandchildren will ever get to see come to pass. So we have to be people that we have a vision that extends beyond us, that goes farther than our lifetime and what we'll ever get to see happen. We have to have a big, long, extended vision. Does anybody know who the richest man in the world is right now? His name is Jeff Bezos. Okay, has anybody ever heard of Amazon? Amazon, okay? I use Amazon all the time. So Jeff Bezos, I recently read an article by him in this magazine, and I'm not advocating for his character at all, but I do think that he is a guy of tremendous vision. He started this company called Blue Origin. It's a space exploration company. And so Jeff Bezos has a vision for this company called Blue Origin. Because of how much energy we use as a civilization, in 300 years they calculate that we could be in a real crisis. And so Jeff Bezos' vision is for this company that we will start utilizing our solar system and space more. And I know that sounds really far-fetched, but he sells $1 billion of Amazon stock every year to privately fund this company. And the big problem right now is that access to space is so expensive because once you use a rocket, you throw it away. All that money's just gone. And so his company is trying to develop ways for us to get access into space so we can make it there cheaper. And his vision is that in hundreds of years, we're going to start colonizing space and using it for industries. And I know that for me, even that's like, what? That is so far-fetched. But if you would have shown, think about if you would have shown someone 2,000 years ago, our civilization, and you would have shown them like an airplane. You know, think about the idea of that. We take steel, we bend it, we weld it all together, and then we put like 300 people in it, put some like rocket propellers on it, and we just shoot people into the sky. They would have called us witches. We would have been burned at the stake if you would have shown people 2,000 years ago what our civilization looked like. And so I would just encourage you to think about things that might be a little far-fetched. Jeff Bezos has a vision for something that he's never going to live to see. He has a vision for something that's going to that won't possibly ever come to fruition for hundreds of years. In the same article, he mentioned how he's building a clock in the side of a mountain down in Texas that without human intervention is going to keep time for 10,000 years. It's this massive clock. And the only reason he's doing it, other than the fact that he can, is as a symbol for long-term thinking. If someone who doesn't know the creator of the universe, if someone who doesn't know the eternal God is thinking long-term, thinking eternally, how much more should the church be having a vision and thinking beyond our own generation and the next generation and the next generation? there are immediate needs that we as a church have to set a vision for. We need to have a vision for this community right now. We have to have a vision for this generation right now. But we also need to have a vision that extends to the next generation, and the next generation, and every generation after that. My last point is that your vision has to be fueled by faith. Verse 6 says that Abraham believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Abraham was believing God for something that he saw zero fruit from immediately, and he was believing God for something that he would never get to see come to pass. God said it, and Abraham just believed him. Faith in God is the driving force that brings our God-sized visions to reality. I recently read another book, that my fiancée Emma gave me called Everybody Always, and it's by this author named Bob Goff. Bob Goff he's a lawyer by trade, but he's an author, he's a speaker, he travels all around. And so because Bob is constantly traveling, he decided years ago to get his pilot's license so that if there was a location nearby that he could fly to instead of drive, he could do that. And so Bob was preparing to go to his next event, and he looked it up on the map, and he realized that if he were to take a car, it was going to be a really long trip, but he could take a shortcut over some mountains and make it a short trip. So he went to the local airport, and he rented just a cheap, junky plane that he could fly there. So Bob flies to Palm Springs, California. He does his event. He goes back to the airport at like 10 o'clock that night. He gets back on the plane, and he starts flying back to San Diego, California, where he lives. He says it was a relatively uneventful flight until he got closer to San Diego. So as Bob gets closer to the airport, he starts going through the checklist of things to land the plane. And the last thing on the checklist is to pull this lever to get the landing gear into position. And so whenever you pull this lever, the landing gear goes down, and what happens is you get these 3 green lights. Whenever you have 3 green lights, you know the landing gear is down in position and you're ready to land. So Bob pulls the lever, he can hear the wheels rotating down into position, and all of a sudden though, something unexpected happens. Bob only gets 2 green lights. So he's immediately awake. He calls into the control tower and he says, "Hey," "I think I only have 2 wheels down." He said, "I don't think my nose gear is down." So the control tower, they say, "Fly by and we'll try to get a visual to see if your front wheel is down or not." So he flies by, they radio back and they say, "We can't see anything, it's too dark." So now he's kind of mad. He's like, "What do you mean you can't see anything? You're the control tower, you're supposed to know stuff." They said, "Okay." They said, "Fly by again, we'll try to get another visual." So Bob Goff, he flies by the control tower again. They say, "Sorry, we got nothing, we can't see anything." They say, "Are you declaring an emergency?" He says, "I declared an emergency in my pants 15 minutes ago." So Bob realizes he has no options. He has to land the plane. So Bob decides he's going to try to land this plane as softly as he can, like a butterfly with sore feet. So he comes in and he tries to gently set the plane down on the back 2 wheels as softly as he can. And Bob knows that in any second, he's either going to feel the bounce of the front wheel there, or metal sparks and propellers are going to go flying everywhere. So he sets the 2 back wheels down, and he counts down. He's like, 3, 2, 1. And he feels a soft bounce of the front wheel, and it was there. Turns out, what had caused all the turmoil and fear and anxiety inside of Bob Goff was a burned out 5-cent light bulb. Bob said that that's kind of what faith is like. Faith is landing the plane despite not knowing what's there. Faith is landing the plane and getting it on the ground even when you don't have all the green lights you're looking for. When you get a God-sized vision, a lot of times you want all the green lights. You want to know, how's this going to happen? Where's the provision for this? So often we get a God-sized vision and we go, how is that ever going to happen? We don't know. Faith, though, is just relying on the things that we can see. The green lights that we do have, like God's love, His faithfulness, His provision, His grace. Faith is reflecting on the things that we do know about God. That He's for us, not against us. That He's in the vision. That He wants to help us and that He's there for us. We have to be a people of faith. We have to be a people of vision. If the Lord is in the vision, He'll give the provision. I think that this church is in the perfect position to get a fresh vision from the Lord. I really believe you are. Let's pray.